the planet.
Yeah.
But you can't just buy the tool. You have to use the tool, know how the tool works, get
Right.
trained on the tool, have a plan for how the tool is going to be in effect. And that segues us nicely into number 8, which is, I'm scared about crime and violence. I should buy a gun.
Listen, I am a combat veteran. I am very pro-gun. I believe in the Second Amendment. I have a concealed carry permit, and I believe in the right of a citizen to prescribe whatever best tools of self-defense that they think will keep them best protected. But staying safe requires your participation. Getting a gun, more like, if you're that concerned about your home security, you should buy a dog instead, because a gun's going to get you dead. No, I would say, unless you are a quote unquote, what I would call a shooter, meaning you are putting at minimum 1,000 rounds downrange a month, and you are carrying that weapon, and you have, with the familiarization of using your iPhone or whatever phone you use, it is that part of your user experience, then yeah, maybe you're the right candidate to have a firearm in the house. But the statistics don't lie, which is that in most cases, homeowners who have that weapon locked up and secured, or it's under the bed, or they don't have the confidence to use it, is almost always taken from them and used on them. So even if that offender, didn't have a weapon, and then you pull the weapon on you, but you don't have the confidence that they have, and they take it from you, you have just exasperated an already bad situation. And I'll tell you right now, having been someone who has been on a number of protective details with a number of high-profile public figures, the number one argument against the everyday citizen having a firearm to keep themselves safe in that heightened scenario is watching people try to take a selfie with their cell phone with a celebrity. Because they have basically, in Gavin's book, Just 2 Seconds, he talks about from the initiation of violence to the completion of that violent act is about 2 seconds in length. So, which basically says, by the time I bring up my gun, shoot you, and it be done, it's about 2 seconds in time. You have about 30 seconds to take a selfie with a celebrity, and people are still like, and they use their phone every day. They could take a photo of their breakfast for Instagram with professional proficiency that would, make insert famous photographer name here. But when they're like, how do I turn on the camera? They're shaking, they can't get it. They don't want to. So it's like the number one argument against people thinking that they can use a firearm for self-defense in a high stress, family breach attack type scenario is false. So get a dog, because a dog is not going to think twice about keeping you protected. A dog is going to serve as advance notice. My dog can tell me when someone's getting close to the house before my security cameras can. Before I get the alert on my phone saying, hey, there's someone at your front yard, my dog is already barking. So I have advance notice. I have deterrence, because when people hear the dog or see the dog, that's a factor. And then they are not going to, so if someone does breach the perimeter, my dog is going to attack them and defend me without even for a moment negotiating against his baser instincts. Whereas we, as people, people think, oh, if a bad guy broke in or if anyone tried to hurt my family, the truth is you probably won't. Most people think that most people are going to freeze. Most people in that heightened, high stress, life or death scenario, people think it's just fight or flight, but there's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And most people are going to freeze. Now, once they get their bearings, they may, choose to fight, or they may choose to flight, or they may choose to do something else. But in that immediacy of that moment, when moments matter most, you are not, unless you are combat proficient, stress inoculated, and ready to rock and roll. And the taking of a human life is not something that anyone should ever take lightly. You know what I mean? I mean, it is a horrible thing to have to consider. It is a near impossible thing to get your mind wrapped around. And God forbid you are ever in that scenario where you would have to live with that consequence for the rest of your life. So no, don't for a second think that simply having a firearm in your possession is going to keep you safe, because it's not. Now,
What's
again,
the saying about you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your training? And
yeah,
so if you're considering getting a
100%.
gun,
And
get
we
the
see that
gun and the training.
and I'm talking
Yeah.
about like real training, like
Yeah,
real,
not the familiarity course, not going to the range
right,
with your buddies
not right.
once every 3 weeks
Yeah,
or
I mean,
months, 3 months.
I've had to retake that that concealed weapon course in like the 10 different states I've lived in, and no one fails. No one fails that course, because they're going to work with you until you pass. But I would not. I mean, and this is why you see, like when police are in shootouts where the person's like 10 feet in front of them and they empty entire magazines at each other, that no one dies. I mean, when the Tsarnaev brothers were caught in that on the end of that street in Boston, on like the south side of Boston, and the police fired something like 1,300 rounds. Like the amount of destruction done to property was staggering. Like people had bullets like riddling their house, and trees were blown up, and cars were riddled with bullets, but the people that they were shooting at were perfectly fine. So don't think for a second that that weapon is, I mean, if you think it's very hard, one of the hardest thing in sports is to hit a round ball with a round bat. An even harder thing to do is shoot a firearm with proficient accuracy.
And a gun is, a gun is not a be all end all solution to safety. And again, we're both on a political standpoint pro 2A.
Yeah.
Guns are a useful tool in the right trained hand. They are fun. Going to the range is objectively enjoyable. But if you're looking at a gun for self-defense, look carefully. Look at the other options like a dog or
I would say like
weapons.
on the list of like top 10 things that I would encourage people to employ for home defense readiness, a weapon would probably be like number 10 on the list. Like make sure you have enough food, make sure you have enough water. Now let's make sure we have cameras outside. Now that we have cameras, let's get to access control. Let's make sure that the doors are fortified. Let's make sure that the windows are fortified. There's a million things that are much more practical and also have much greater application against bad weather or power going out, or grocery stores running out of food or resupply or any of these things. There's 10 things I would recommend that you put in place to ensure the safety and security of your family before we ever get to firearms. So let's take a real good, honest, hard look at what we're trying to achieve. And then if we get to the point where the firearm is part of that comprehensive package, yes, we can introduce that in as a next step. But you don't want to go from step 0 to step 11, you want to learn how to crawl, walk, run.
And especially if, kind of like we were talking before, it's you got mugged, you got scared,
right?
You called your buddy who was in the army, who was a cop, and he took you to the gun shop and got yourself a little Glock, and then you hit the range a couple times, and then it went in the gun safe. Please have a gun safe. And then you forgot about it, and it's just there.
Well, yeah. And also, like, I'm not even so sure that a handgun would be the right, like, even if I was going to talk, I had a lot of conversations with friends who were very anti-gun right up until the pandemic. And then all of a sudden they were like, hey, like if this breaks bad, like maybe I should have something. And I always recommended a shotgun. It was like, listen, you just hear that, and that's enough of a deterrence to get most people to stop in their tracks. 2, like you put that thing down the hallway, you don't exactly have to be surgical. But then 3, like if you do run out of food and there's a flock of geese flying over, like you can hunt for dinner from your backyard. So there's a million other practical applications that can come into place that have nothing to do with you emulating what you saw in a John Wick movie. Okay, so I again champion 2A, but not everyone is a race car driver, and not everyone should own a race car.